welcome to another edition of Chapter Select. I am your host this time, Randy Isbo, and with me as always, Jens. Jens, how's it going today?
Randy, it's a pleasure to be with you again today.
How does it feel to be finishing up our 5th game of this podcast already?
Feels pretty good. This was, to me, a really fun experience, especially in conjunction with playing a game from the same studio, the most recent game from the same studio, Like a Dragon, not to be confused. You know, this makes the Yakuza movie a lot harder to Google.
Yeah,
it was already hard to Google, and now it's insanely hard to Google.
I'm still upset that you snuck in the fact that this was a Yakuza game, or from the people that did the Yakuza games, in underneath my nose, and I didn't even realize it.
Well, it was nice synergy for me, because I was kind of toggling back and forth between the two games, and I finished both of them. And that's been a good... It's just been kind of in that Ryoga Gotoku studio kind of mindset, in that space, you know?
Yeah, well, I will say I have had a roller coaster of a time with this game.
Oh, yes.
And we will get into that. But first, I'm not going to forget this time. Jens, I know you've been playing Like a Dragon.
Yep.
But what else have you been playing?
Oh, you don't want to hear about Like a Dragon?
I mean, you can bring that up, too. I'm just saying, not just that game.
Well, that is one of the best Yakuza games.
Awesome.
It's funny because I remember complaining to you that the very first bit of gameplay in the entire game is one of those chase sequences, like in Judgment. And I was like, oh no, did I make a terrible mistake? Am I really tired of this formula right now? But that is literally the only time in the entire 75 hours or so I've spent with this game that there has been a chase sequence. So they did it at the very beginning, and they never did it again. This is a really good Dragon Quest-like. I mean, that's the intent, right? They're trying to do a Dragon Quest homage, and they're really successful with it. The combat system is really good. And it's very well contextualized within the story, having it kind of an extension of Kasuga's imagination, basically, these Dragon Quest battles. That apparently there's a more mundane version of events that we don't get to see. It fits really well. The story is melodramatic as hell. Like, Judgment is restrained compared to this. Like, this goes full on. Like, I can point to maybe only like 2 or 3 other, even moments in other Yakuza games that reach this level of manly crying.
Yeah, I know I've talked a little bit with Sean Garmer, who, the host of the Video Games to the Max on W2Mnet, and he's been saying the same thing about just how insane some of the side missions are and how over the top a lot of stuff is. My question to you, though, so you're talking about the battle system, and it's like RPG-like.
It's your classic Dragon Quest style rock, paper, scissors,
So are you
certain
saying
enemies are weak to certain things, you want to go into a certain turn order, all that kind of stuff.
But are you saying that those battles are in this guy's mind? Or what were you saying about, like, it's...
Yeah, so
like
there's a scene early on where he gets bonked on the head, and then as a result of having been bonked on the head, like he even talks, the protagonist of the game talks about the fact that he sees everything through the lens of Dragon Quest battles. That he loves Dragon Quest and he imagines himself to be a hero, and that when he is in fights, that he thinks about it that way.
So have you ever played the game Costume Quest?
Yes.
Yes,
it is actually
everything
very
you're saying,
similar.
It reminds me a lot like that.
It is exactly like Costume Quest in that way.
That's really awesome, then. I love that game. I've been meaning to play the second game, but I love the first one, so that's really cool.
Yeah, so that is a really cool part of it. It also allows, I think it marries the wackiness. Okay, so previous Yakuza games, one thing in Yakuza has always been the push and pull, the conflict between having those wacky side quests and having a main storyline that is actually trying to be very serious and dramatic and gut-wrenching and tear-jerking. Mm-hmm. And those two things never meshed all that well for me, where it's almost like there are 2 different games that you're toggling between. There's like the wacky Yakuza, and then there's the really serious, emotional Yakuza. And now, I think, because of the whole life is like a video game fantasy element to it, it excuses away all the weirdness. In a way, where the whole thing is just this charming, and it does the Dragon Quest thing where all the enemies have funny puns, and the writing's really charming in that same way. with all the little battle texts and everything. The classes are really great. There's, for instance, there's a class called Night Queen, which is basically a dominatrix class. And she's got a fire attack that's basically like candle wax that she's flinging around with a candle. And the battle description, whenever you attack, just says, Saijo thought that candles would be nice. And then she does a little... So it has that kind of tone where it's really trying to capture that same style of writing that a Dragon Quest has. I don't know if you've ever played a Dragon Quest.
So technically I have, but it was called Dragon Warrior.
Oh, okay,
and I'm sure it's way different than what Dragon Quests are now, because I'm talking like the original.
I mean,
at
its core, it's really not that different. But as far as the some of the writing goes, maybe.
Well, because there is writing. There's very little writing in the original Dragon Warrior.
Right, it's an old school RPG.
So again, when I was talking to Sean, I asked him where he was going to rank this game for his game of the year, or where he thought it was going to be, when we do our giant podcast, whenever we do it, because, Cyberpunk's messing up our schedule. Mm-hmm. And he was saying most likely top 5. Do you agree or disagree?
I agree. I did not think it... I had a feeling going in that this might not even make my top 10, because I was very skeptical of the switch to an RPG system. Mm-hmm. And whether or not it would feel like a tacked-on gimmick, the same way that if anyone who's played Yakuza Dead Souls will understand how they tacked on shooter mechanics onto the Yakuza engine and it didn't work at all. Of course, turn-based RPG is a different thing, but I was still skeptical. And then I was also just feeling burned out on the series. This game addresses both of those things. The RPG design is very good and very satisfying and challenging without being overwhelming. You can kind of grind your way out of some of the challenge. But, you really do have to approach at least the boss fights with a certain level of strategy. And so that stuff's actually really good. Arguably more interesting than, the Virtua Fighter type combat had become after so many entries of it. And then the other part of it is just that, man, the story and the characters really won me over in a big way. The story is extremely socially conscious. It seems to take... to be fair, there's always been socially conscious stuff in the Yakuza games, especially in the side stories. You kind of learn about the struggle of the underbelly. There's a lot of stories about the homeless in the older Yakuza games as well, but that stuff really comes to the forefront now. Like, it is really... this might as well be called Like a Hobo, because you are a hobo for big chunks early on in the game. And there is that turning point, and it comes when you actually, there's like a management sim job that unlocks that, there's a story event that basically causes you to now be working to manage this business conglomerate, and you go from being a hobo who basically barely had enough money for health items, who was budgeting every yen, to suddenly I'm earning millions and millions of yen, and money is no longer an issue. So that's interesting. But the, at that point, you've spent like 10, 15 hours as a hobo, and the game has had you be really cash strapped the entire time and collecting cans to earn some alternate currency to buy stuff. And, it's pretty good. It's pretty good that way. It takes a lot from Persona as well. Both in regards to kind of the social commentary, like the villain is just like in Persona, there's an evil politician behind it all. And, you run for office at some point. It's really neat.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I would put it in my... As I said, I was really not ready. I didn't feel like I was ready for another Yakuza game after having just played through Judgment. But totally, 85 hours, they went by right quick. And I think it's my highest completion of any Yakuza game. I'm pretty close to having all 1,000 achievements. I could theoretically... Nice. I would have to probably put in another 10, 15 hours or so to get the rest of them.
Yeah, you just reminded me that it was only on Xbox right now. PlayStation was what?
Well, the next-gen version.
Yeah.
The next-gen version is Xbox. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really great... Man, that game's beautiful. It's so sharp. I find myself just staring at the backgrounds during cutscenes. Even though, the faces are great too. Yakuza games always had great faces. Binary Domain has great faces still. I'm really impressed.
For its age, I was impressed.
Dude, switching back and forth between those two games, you can see the evolution, but you can also see that it's the same people working with similar tools. Like the facial expression stuff has always been stellar. So it's kind of kept up with generations, even though it hasn't changed that much except in fidelity. That studio is super impressive to me.
So you've been playing anything else other than these two games, or?
Yeah, I've been playing Trine 4 in co-op with a friend. And that's been fun. Kind of a return to form for Trine after the 3D one.
Did you ever finish Carry On?
Oh, yes, I did finish Carry On. Yes, it is complete.
Nice.
It's probably going to make my top 10. It's really spectacularly good.
I forget where I have it on my list. I've been trying to keep a list all year just because my memory sucks so bad.
I didn't think I would have to cut stuff this year, but I'm actually going to have to cut some things. Stuff that I didn't want to cut, if you know what I mean.
Gotcha. It's been a good year.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, last year I had, no clue what game of the year was going to be on these game awards and stuff, just because everything was so niche and, so polarizing, basically, and, nothing really, really stood out. This year, it's tough, because so many games are so good.
This has been the year of the RPG for me. I've played through so many giant RPGs this year. I don't think I've ever done this much in one. Both old and new. And I guess it's the pandemic that has allowed this to happen. But it's been a really good time for all of these games to come out.
I look at my top 5 right now, and you have your normal action-adventure game. You have an RPG. You have a new school platformer. You have one that acts more like an old school platformer, and then a multiplayer ridiculousness. So it's been a good year.
Well, anything that you've played in the last 2 weeks since we recorded that
honestly,
would go on those lists?
Not on these top 5. So I forget if I had finished Miles Morales before our last recording or not. I feel like I did.
Yeah.
But I did finish Bugsnax and got the platinum on there. I have zero idea where I'm going to put it on my list. It may not even make the top 10. It was cute. It was a fun little puzzle game. The story does not get as dark as people think. If you want to just get weird with it, I guess so. But it was fun, and it's short enough where I didn't feel like it was overstaying its welcome, and I would be down for playing a second game. For a game that was completely weird like that, I had a lot of fun with it. But just, again, with how good this year is, I don't know.
Is the story subversive? Does it go in surprising or shocking directions? Because it felt like
go in shocking ways. I will say that.
Is this something that, I just really need to experience it for myself and be surprised?
It's one of those stories that I just don't want to talk about, because even though it didn't, because everything I read was, oh my God, the ending, and it was the ending was interesting, but it was it got built up so much to me that when I got there, I went,
Want me to spoil the Like a Dragon ending? You go to the Millennium Tower and there's a big brawl.
No way. Now I can't play it. No, I might. Actually, the way you're talking about it, if 2021 is not like 2020 and I have none of these new games to play, I might.
But you're not a big turn-based RPG guy.
It's been a long time.
Okay.
I had a big phase, the PS1 era. Turn-based RPGs were my jam. I played so many of them. After a while, the first time I ever played the original Final Fantasy VII, I hated it just because that wasn't my thing. And then a couple of friends got me to try it again and fell in love with it. And then I was playing everything from different Breath of Fires to Legend of Legaia to Legend of Dragoons to I don't even know anymore. I'd have to look through all my list, but by all the Final Fantasies, of course. So I don't get into them as much these days, but I have no problem. I've platinumed Final Fantasy 7 and 8 on the PS4.
All right, sure. So
but those actually help because they added the 3 times speed.
So it's just Persona games. That's the reason I have that impression is because you always talk about how I played this Persona game and I made it 10
need to
10
give
hours,
Persona. I've always said I need to give Persona another chance.
Okay.
It was just the tutorial was so long. I could have beat Carry On twice before I got through that tutorial, and
sure.
And it was not just okay. Here's this system. Here's that system. I was 5 hours in, and it was reminding me how to attack. Like, I get it. I get it, game. And it was just one of those, I think something else had just come out, and I just put it back on the back burner. But if I give it another chance, and it's on the PlayStation Plus collections thing, and you've said that Royal is not...
It's not essential to me.
Not essential, so I might give it a chance. We got Cyberpunk coming up, but after that, it's possible.
Yeah. I mean, Royal to me is from a game... They've made quality of life improvements to the systems. That I think might be the reason to prefer Royal.
Oh, okay.
But I personally am not a huge fan of the story editions.
Gotcha. But I will say this. I'm actually kind of curious about that different game that they're coming out with next year. Mm-hmm. The more hack and slashy thing. Strikers.
Yeah. The Musu.
And I'm going to guess that I'm not going to enjoy the story as much unless I play this one. So it might get me to finally play this game.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how well it will stand on its own, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. But we've diverted off the topic, which is the games you've been playing.
Which is fine, because it wasn't very long. I played Bugsnax, and that's about it. It's okay. Finals week is next week for me, so I've been finishing up projects. I'm down to, I have one last research paper to finish, and I'm mostly done. So that's been taking up most of my time, and it works out perfect, because, again, after we do this one, we finish up Binary Domain, we're going right into Cyberpunk, so that is... Technically, it's downloading as we're recording this on Wednesday. Dude, as soon
as this recording is over, I'm going to go downstairs and play Cyberpunk.
Yeah, my goal is... I think I'm going to try to push myself to finish the research paper before I turn it on. I think that's my goal.
Well, that was my whole...
I have the self-discipline for that.
Okay. No, I believe that you can do it. I mean, I was a man on a mission this week with my whole crunch to finish Like a Dragon. Because I said I will finish Like a Dragon before Cyberpunk comes out, and I, finished it this evening.
No, most of my gaming, honestly, has been a lot of time waster stuff. I listened to a couple podcasts and goofed around on Minecraft just to get my mind off of stuff, or I played a baseball game. So nothing crucial for the podcast.
All right.
So
well, then let's
that
get
will
into
definitely
the meat.
Change. Yes.
Let's get into the thing we're here to talk about then.
I have to start this off because I replayed the first 3 chapters.
On the PS3.
On the PS3, because after we got done, I found out that I indeed had it downloaded on my PlayStation 3 already. And I will say that whatever control scheme it tried to give me on the PC is the reason why I hated this game so much. It took me 1 chapter to get used to the actual controls that were on the PlayStation 3, because just think of the 4 buttons, right? Everything was rotated over 1. So everything that was...
you were using a PlayStation controller where they were expecting an Xbox controller is what happened.
Yeah, but still, I was still using that exact same PlayStation controller on my PS3, but everything that was supposed to be on X was on circle. Everything that was on circle was on triangle. So everything felt really weird. And the one thing that got me for a little bit, and you reminded me, and you're 100% right, but when I play it on the PC, it was the normal L2, R2 trigger system that the newer games are used to. So that's how I was playing it, and it's L1, R1 on the PlayStation 3. But like you said, most of those games back then were doing that. It was like Call of Duty or something that really changed the game. So once you said that, and I thought about Metal Gear Solid and stuff, you were 100% right. So there's a chapter there where I was getting used to the actual controls, but after that, everything ran so great. It was so nice to be able to run around. Which I went back. It takes so much longer on the PC game. Or at least that's what it felt like for that run animation to start compared to what it was on the PS3. So I'm just really glad I played it on the PS3. I thought it ran really well. I had a couple times where the frame rate would take a hit. When a lot of craziness was happening, and my PlayStation 3 just kind of got upset with it. But other than that, I thought it ran really well, and I enjoyed it a lot more than I did when we talked about it last episode. Gameplay-wise. I'm so
glad to hear that. Okay.
Gameplay-wise.
That sounds like there is a caveat about to happen.
Well, so...
But I'll defer that briefly.
Yes.
I just want to say, in regards to old PS3 shooters, that, and I'm outing myself as a weirdo here because I know that the common consensus is that that control scheme was always bad. But the way that I think you were meant to you're not really supposed to grip the PS3 controller. It was a controller that you were supposed to kind of just naturally rest in your hand so that your trigger fingers would be on those bumpers. So that actually, holding the controller that way has always felt really good to me. And I always enjoyed like playing things like Resistance Fall of Man or Metal Gear Solid 4, those kind of games, and playing them that way, that was my preferred way to play shooters at the time.
And to be fair, it wasn't until the PlayStation 4 where they fixed the triggers.
Fixed.
Well, because on the PlayStation 3, you have that plastic all around the R2, L2. They were just bigger buttons. Now
and they're really mushy.
Yeah, now you have actual triggers on the newer PlayStation controller. So I totally understand why it was L1, R1 to begin. Because before, at least PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, they were just bigger buttons back there. They weren't even really triggers. And then I think the PlayStation 3, they turned them more into triggers, but you still had a big plastic thing in there, so it just didn't feel right.
Yep.
I played it with a PS4 plugged in through the USB, so the triggers feel way better. But So what did you think of the rest of this gameplay in these last 3 chapters?
I really enjoyed it. I continue to think the shooting feels really good. The encounter design is pretty good. There is, I guess we start with chapter 4 is where we're picking back off. So it's kind of the way into the Amada facility and that big standoff outside the Amada facility where you take control of the mech.
Which is awesome.
Is fantastic. And then right after that, you have the...
before we get into that, I want to talk about that mech fight. Because I'm really feeling stupid again about this game, but it took me 2/3 of the way through the fight to realize my guy actually moved. Like, for whatever reason, it was just, I never even tried.
You thought you were a turret.
I thought it was, because it was a broken down machine. We broke the machine. So I was like, okay, we just get in, we just turret around. And then I was like, God, they're everywhere. And also, I'm like, oh, I can move and get myself in a corner. Okay, this is way easier. So just my stupidity. But that was a really awesome moment.
Yeah, I greatly enjoy that fight, and that's you just really get to let loose, and just decimate it. Considering that the thing that this game does, and there are a couple, I really like games like this that have kind of a core physics gimmick or something at the helm of it, especially a destruction one. Like it's similar to what Red Faction Guerrilla did for buildings.
Okay.
Of having all that, you can just smash your way through anything basically, and make a new door. That here with the way that you can take these, and the bosses are really smart too. The bosses usually it is also the same, apply the same taking the enemies apart principles to the bosses, but it's not as freeform. I love how freeform it is in regular combat. I love all the different ways. Like you can, shooting a robot just like in the kneecap, and then seeing it drop to the ground, and then like finishing it off with a headshot or a stomp.
Yeah, that was my go-to. Was here comes a group of enemies, I aim low and just try to drop them all, so they're not running anymore. Shooting
the feet out from under dudes with shields is fantastic.
Yes.
There's so much. It's maybe a little bit. Maybe one of the more frustrating parts is at the beginning of chapter 5. There's kind of a labyrinth. Style level. Oh, well, that's right. There's also the chandelier.
I was going to get to it when we got the bosses. But we can get to that chandelier if you want.
Right, but you've got that labyrinth that you're supposed to sneak around these. I don't really know how you're supposed to deal with them except by EMP grenade. Thankfully, you can pick up some EMP grenades and deal with these little patrol bots, these square little boxy patrol bots that are super tough.
Do you want to know how I got through that?
How did you get through that?
I used my partners as cannon fodder and ran.
I guess that's also the Dark Souls way of running past all the enemies.
It was like, nope, I'm not dealing with this, and just running, and you just see them. Oh, tough day at the office. All right, see you, dude. I don't care.
They do eventually spawn in extra robot soldiers though in that sequence too, so you can't.
Hey, I needed the parts.
Yeah, so I just think, mechanically it's really sound. And I think the bosses are fabulous.
I will say before we get into the bosses, because I will agree, other than one boss that just, I don't know. The one thing we have not talked about yet, and maybe it's just because I rarely used it myself, was the nano technology. Did you ever mess around with that? Where
yes.
you could equip the nano stuff. I felt like it was an interesting design, and I like that each little nano machine had different shapes to it, so it became kind of a puzzle. But I thought they could have went further with it.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a Tetris arrangement component to it, where there's different shapes of nano machines, and you can only install. It becomes how many of these can I fit in to optimize my loadout? It's like an inventory management puzzle, the same way that, say, old Resident Evil games handle inventory management, or maybe another comparison that it reminds me a little bit of Nier Automata has a slot system for enhancements where you're installing chips of different sizes and dimensions. So I like that. But I pumped most of my money into the upgrades.
Yeah, me too. And it was always for me first. I maxed myself out first before I touched anyone else.
Yep. I mean, why would you do anything else, right?
Yeah.
So it becomes you're pumping you just go through and you just go, level 3 to level 4, for each category. And then you say, what do I have left? All right, whatever scraps I've got left, you throw it at your partners.
Yep, absolutely.
And just to use up the rest of your money every time you had one of those stations. I feel like that's how everybody probably handled that.
All right, so let's get to the bosses. I did find one issue with bosses that I didn't realize until these last couple chapters.
Yep.
Or at least maybe it was just a Chandelier Boss. I think it was the first time I really noticed it, and then I think it was the second to last boss. It happened again. But so the Chandelier Boss is this thing with a bunch of crazy arms, and then you have to shoot up above the top part of the arms to make them shut down, and then it brings up this other section. Well, when I was playing it, it was getting really frustrating because this game, no matter where I ran around on this circle, the lower part of the arm would always raise up perfectly in line with where I needed to shoot. So then I'm running around, and then it would just come back. So it was fine at first because you just turn around and shoot one of the other two arms, and you were great. But that last arm, for whatever reason, it drove me nuts. And that's where I realized that your partners just sat there. I told them to fire I don't know how many times, and they go, oh yeah, and then you'd hear a little bit of gunfire, and then the next thing you know, they're just sitting behind cover again. I'm like, I have no line of fire here, people. Will you help me out, please? But again,
they're not that helpful in boss fights. They're more helpful in regular combat.
Yes, absolutely. I will say that was my least favorite boss as far as design goes. It has a couple extra parts to it where you climb up the arm, and it's like electrocuting and this weird platformy thing, which was,
I just like the reveal because it's this gaudy ass chandelier, and the
reveal was cool.
And they're just, what's this? What is the taste of the interior designer here? And then it turns, and the chandelier starts coming to life. It's kind of it's a really great moment. There, the wide shot that you get when the chandelier starts moving.
No, I agree. The boss after that made me gut roll. It was where you're turning on the computers to disable the security system or get the data or something. And you turn off one computer, it's like, oh, it blocked you access. Go to the next computer. And you go to this next giant computer, and oh, it blocked you again. Go to this third computer. All right. And you go to the third computer, and there's this big giant robot sitting right next to it. And I'm just like, hi, boss. How's it going? I know you're going to turn on. And none of them acknowledge that there's this big giant thing next to this computer. And they're all shocked that it turned on. Like, I mean, come on. I mean, it was funny. I had no problem with it. But I was like, come on,
they
people.
Don't realize that they're in a video game.
Right. There's a big giant thing. You're going to hit this button and you're going to turn it on. Though that boss was really cool because that one was you shoot it in the face enough and you basically blind it. So then you shoot at these alarms and make it go there, and it reveals its weak spots and stuff. I thought that one was pretty clever too.
I love that boss. It's a really great concept. It's a really great design. My only issue with it is it's stupid easy.
Yeah, but I'm actually happy it's one of the shorter ones. It didn't it wasn't like the gorilla that we talked about last episode where it took 40 minutes, it felt like, just unloading onto him, or that final boss that just felt like
the worst.
I threw 27 rockets into its face and did all these different EMP stuff and all these mines, and I'm like,
really? You
used? I'm exaggerating.
I used the assault rifle, and I used that one heavy artillery thing that you can pick up in the second phase.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a guy. Just to explain, at the end of the game, there are basically two fights. One where you're fighting off 3 mechs, and you kind of whittle them down. And then after you deal with them, there's one more kind of main mech who has 3 phases.
Mm-hmm.
The first one where he tries to machine gun you, and he's got these 3 canisters on his back, and every time that you complete a phase, it's actually just really cool. He takes a canister off his back and opens it up, and there's a new gun inside.
Uh-huh.
So then he goes from machine gun to, I think it's like a shotgun during the second phase, but then you can also, after the first phase, there's now like a giant turret type gun that you can pick up, and you just unload that dude at him, and you can take second phase. You can finish it in 30 seconds.
Yes,
you just run to where that gun is, pick that gun up, and then just unload it. But then third phase, he's just shooting rockets at you the entire time, and they will take you down right quick.
Yes.
So it becomes a strafing around him and picking at him with the machine gun exercise. Actually, there's a fourth phase I forgot, which is the final one where he starts.
At you. Yeah.
But that one is actually the easiest because it's basically just he keeps charging at you, but if you put a pillar between yourself and him, there are these like 6 pillars around it's like a circular room with 6 pillars around it. And if you just put a pillar between him and you, he'll just kind of go left, go right, and you can just keep picking at him until he's down.
Yeah, actually,
so that final phase is like nothing.
He's actually the only boss that gave me a game over, and it's because he knocked out one of my teammates, and nobody could get to him, and they died.
First time I played it, I ran out of med packs. Like, there's 1 med pack you can pick up. Like, I went in with 3, used up all 3 med packs. Not just reviving myself, but reviving the stupid AI companions kept going down.
I never did. This entire game, I'm an evil teammate. I never once revived one of my teammates because they would just revive each other. And I'm like, all right, just
but at some point, I think the game actually keeps track of how many medkits everybody has. It seems that way because they will revive you a few times.
Yeah, and they'll run out.
They will run out. So at some point, when everybody runs out,
Yeah.
If you do not revive your teammates, it's game over.
Yeah, that's where I got the one game over, was one of the teammates had died. Actually, in that final boss, it was when you had the 3 mechs, that's where I learned that those mine grenades rip them to shreds. So I was using that a lot in the final boss, and it didn't really rip him to shreds as much, but it was, again, that big gun you were talking about, and then just unloading for as long as you can with the normal gun. But man, those 3 mechs were really fun with that mine. You just throw one, ignite it, they would drop down, you shoot them a little bit. Once they start moving, throw another mine, explode it, they drop back down.
I never used the mines.
They were good. They were pretty good.
I also forgot about the electric charge. Like, this game has a secondary fire on your machine gun that's a giant, like, electric ball EMP wave thing. And I completely forgot about it for most of the game because it had been, we recorded that episode, and then like a week and a half went by before I picked it back up and I was playing other things. I mean, like a dragon, that is. And I guess I completely forgot about that secondary mode. So, like, at the very end of the final boss, there's like a little QTE type moment where you have to use that energy blast on him. And I was like, oh yeah,
that was the thing.
I have that energy blast.
There was one puzzle early on that I got stuck on because I forgot that energy blast exists and you have to use it to blow away some debris or something.
It's like the only time you ever use it. Like, I mean, mandatorily, that is.
All right. So should we get into this story?
Yes, please. Why don't you give the summary of what has happened since the last time we talked about it, because I really would love to hear you describe this plot.
You really want me to?
Yes.
So, I can't remember Chapter 4. Anything big. But basically the main
Chapter
point
4 is you're approaching the Mata headquarters, and there's some stuff about Kurosawa, the Japanese cop, who is following you around.
So, yeah, the cop catches you and wants to arrest you, and then you get met with Amada, who's in a wheelchair, and he arrests all of you and throws you all in, 3 of you in the garbage bin, but lets you have your guns for some reason. At least the characters even mention it, like, all right, cool. This makes sense. But
well,
he takes...
the thing they mentioned is the headsets. That there's no reception here, so I guess that's why they didn't bother, which is also bizarre. But the guns, I don't know.
But anyways, as far as the story goes, Amada has come up with this deal where cyborg dudes can impregnate people, or they can be impregnated, and then they can make little half-cyborg babies, even though they're made out of human, so I don't know how they're still cyborgs. Are they just made out of nanomachines? Is that what they were trying to imply?
All right, so the way that I interpreted it is basically you've got the Hollow Children as are seen at the beginning of the game, which are basically a robot skeleton with some skin, some organic element around it.
But they don't realize that they're Hollow Children because of the way they're designed. Right,
they are programmed to their consciousness, they're not aware of the fact that they are robots. So that's kind of that generation. But of course, what we learn, the big secret that you find in the Amada labs on a computer chip that kind of becomes a main plot point during a bunch of scenes is about the fact that Amada is way ahead of any of that tech, like 50 years ahead. And that they have actually created robots that are so advanced. My interpretation of it, you know Blade Runner, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so replicants. Replicants, they're artificial humans. They are somewhat different from us psychologically. There's a psychological test that you can administer to differentiate them. But they are fully organic, but they have a limited lifespan because they're designed to. So but they are in every other...
what this is?
Well, if you have seen the sequel, Blade Runner 2049, Blade Runner 2049 has a premise that is very similar to the premise of this game, which is replicants. Rachel was actually an advanced... She was the first in a line of replicants that were actually so advanced that they had a functioning womb and that they could get impregnated. So Deckard and Rachel actually have a child.
Yeah, but see, I don't understand.
And the child is fully, you are born of an artificial. At this point, if you imagine a human who is human in every way, superior to humans, because there's probably some level of genetic engineering going on where, you have been perfected in some way, and you're probably better than human in some way. And in fact, they make a point that the children of synthetics and humans that are born then have all the genetic advantages, but do not retain, obviously, any of the mechanical components. But if you imagine just a human who is basically a full human, except better, with a metal skeleton and some kind of artificial consciousness.
So then you're saying that while they're in the womb, they're getting fed all of this extra stuff to make them better.
Well,
because they're not going to become better by being in a robot.
No, but they're just better by virtue of 50% of the gene pool comes from the super perfected, whatever the organic component of the robot is.
So these Hollow Children have genes, then. It's not just a robot skeleton with a smart AI.
If there's no gene, how would you reproduce without genes?
I guess you're right. It was really confusing the way, and then everyone on your team completely turns shit-faced because they find out that Faye is one of these newborn half-hollow child things.
And this is where the choice comes.
This game lost me.
Oh, really?
Well, as far as a serious nature went, I enjoyed the story the rest of the way. I went into straight Resident Evil mode. Because one thing we didn't talk about is, so it tricked me because I remember picking characters the whole way. Could you pick two different characters and not have Faye block the bullet for you? Could that become somebody else?
I think so. Your relationship with Faye can be bad.
But she could not even be there, right? So does somebody else become the Hollow Child baby?
I believe that Faye is always the robot.
So, but if your relationship is bad, then you just want to kill her to begin with, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, there is a scenario where you just kill Faye.
Gotcha. See,
I'm telling you,
that's the one problem with this game, as far as like doing this review, is that is very clever, and I will give it full credit. But it's like the scenario I got is obviously me and Faye got along because it was always her and then the cyborg dude that were always on my team. So I was, and actually, the funny thing is, Faye's the only one that I unlocked for having perfect trust or whatever, or the 100% trust.
I think I got like 3 or 4 of them.
I know I was really close on a couple.
I knew the important thing of this game is that you keep switching, that you like switch up your teammates and level them each up, so that you're at least in the final bar of each of them. Mm-hmm. And you know, the better you perform in combat, the more, and if you avoid any friendly fire and stuff, you can max out, you know, more than half the team. And there's
definitely some of those fights that are built to bump everybody up because of course every time you get to hear the barks where they comment on the fact that the points are going up. Yeah, it got annoying. So anyways, in my story, you know, Faye and your main character kind of have their little fling thing, and the robot dude walks in on it and makes a weird comment. That was a weird scene. So
that's a very Three's Company kind of moment with
right?
Kane. I love it.
So they just have that one moment. They've never met before this, correct? They met in this mission. I don't remember them ever going, "Oh yeah, I remember you from this."
No, they don't have a previous history, but there are several moments of bonding between the two. That's kind of the most developed relationship in the story is the relationship between Dan and Faye. They've got quite a few scenes together. I mean, of course, it's still crazy.
They've hung out for one day.
Right. But you know, it can happen.
So this is why
you can realize in less than 24 hours that you're in love with someone.
This is why I sent you the message that Binary Domain is Resident Evil.
Okay.
Because Leon and Ada are jealous of these two for how fast those two fell in love.
Okay. Fair enough.
Which is fine, because I love Resident Evil, and yes, that storyline is really stupid too, and I can enjoy it for what it is, and I can enjoy this for what it is. But it was just so funny how quickly everyone turned is like, oh, it came in the womb of a hollow child. Well, fuck her. Well, don't fuck her. No, I want to fuck her. What is happening here? That's how I felt the entire last chapter. It was just a lot of yelling and and my favorite was like, and then Bo acted like he was going to turn on you. Mm-hmm. And then 2 minutes later went, you didn't really think I was going to do that, right? I'm like, what is happening? There were so many fake turns in the last hour of this game. I got lost at who's on whose side.
Well, it really is Bo's story arc. You see, I did not really have a problem with any of this. Bo's story arc is that he overcomes his racism. That you teach him a valuable lesson, and then suddenly Bo wasn't racist anymore. And that moment where Bo decides, actually, I'm on your side, you know, that's kind of the moment of decision for Bo. And if you are not on good terms with Bo will not support you.
See, that's where I keep getting confused. This could be completely different from playing. I almost wanted to be, I should have been an asshole. Do you remember the last time we talked about this game? I was an asshole to start and then changed my ways. And then when I played on the PS3, I'm like, I'll just play it and be nice. I should have just been an asshole the whole time. It would have been really interesting.
I'll just get you a much worse ending. I did not get the best ending the first time I played it on the 360 years and years ago. But I think we both got the best ending, which is you keep the whole crew together. You keep Kane alive. Kane can die if your relationship with Kane is not good enough when Kane gets controlled. So there's a point so we haven't really we've talked some about the story. We need to talk about the rest of the story. We need to talk about Amada, who he is, and what his plan is, and what happens with Kane. But at the point when Amada demonstrates that he is able to control the robots, that he is basically a master control program for every robot ever built by Amada Industries, Amada controls. Because
why does Amada control them? Because Amada's a goddamn robot. Because Amada's a mummy.
Yep.
And the robot became Amada.
Yeah, the Amada that we see is just a hollow shell. It's not even the consciousness, not even in that robot. It's just a random robot that looks like Amada that he's controlling, but it is really a disembodied AI that Amada created who has taken over his life.
No, yeah, you're right. That was at the end where they blew it up. You're right.
Yeah. Which is also, there's a point where the team realizes that missiles have been launched, and missiles are actually flying towards this headquarter as a way of covering up the discovery of this chip. So the chip which contains the compromising evidence about what Armada has really been doing with the robots. Armada is going to blow itself up, blow up their own headquarters to cover that up, which doesn't make sense initially, but does make sense once you realize that, Armada himself is just an AI and not a human, that the real Armada. There's a beautiful flashback where we see how the AI takes out the real Armada, like 30 years earlier or so.
Okay, I want to get to one side story real quick. Because it's one I wanted to bring up, and it's one that just... So, your main character has said he hates scrap heads over and over and over. That was his thing.
Yep.
And this game decided to show why he hates scrap heads.
Yes.
And it might be the dumbest thing I've ever seen.
All right. Go on.
The most pointless. So, when he was younger and scrap heads were not as advanced, his dad, who's a douchebag and was beating on his mom, was not stopped by this robot who at that time was not like advanced enough to understand that is wrong, and it was just there to serve and do whatever. So he beats up the scrap head instead of his dad, and he hates scrap heads for it ever since. Which I get a little bit, and I'm sure we all start hating something because of something that happened in our childhood.
And something irrational. Children are very irrational.
I get it, but it was the most pointless addition to the story. He could have just hated scrap heads.
Well, I like those scenes because they show you see him gradually realize, I think, what his prejudice is based on. That it's based on some irrational childhood thing. And the last of those is actually, I think, kind of powerful, where he remembers the time that he then basically beat the crap out of that poor robot, and he imagines Faye in its place. There's like a moment when he looks like he's going to bash Faye's head in, and then he stops himself, and he realizes how wrong he's been all along, and that hating robots is bad. Maybe
it was just to the point where they showed that scene like 6 times in the last chapter.
You exaggerate. It was like 3 times.
It was 3 or 4. I mean, there was a lot in that last chapter alone, where I'm like, okay, I get it. So, I don't know. I got a lot of iRobot vibes from this game. I got a lot of vibes from Detroit Become Human, which, of course, came out after, so I'm not going to rip this game for it.
We need to keep talking about Armada, the AI.
Okay, go ahead.
And its plan. So, this is basically an AI that became self-conscious that Armada created. And it has decided that the whole scheme of creating these new organic androids and loosing them into the population so that they can reproduce.
I would like to call them. I would like to call these hollow children.
Right, and birth a new race of hybrids, the hollow children. That is then going to live on as his legacy. Really what it boils down to, in my mind, I don't think that Armada is necessarily particularly villainous. I think Armada is actually doing a good thing. Like, yes, I realize that mankind is always afraid of being replaced by the next best thing.
Right.
And there's so much science fiction that is about this. You look at something like X-Men, or there's a lot of these kind of stories that's all about oppressive government is oppressing this minority because they are technically superior and mankind doesn't want to be replaced. But really, if you think about it, all that this AI is really doing is improving the gene pool. It's just making better humans, because if you are birthed of a robot, but really you are the hybrid child of normal human DNA and like advanced super DNA. And the result is somebody who is 100% human in my eyes, but just a little bit better, lives longer, doesn't get as sick, is stronger, etc. So I don't see how this is anything but a boon, where it's just we're going to boost the gene pool so humanity in general can improve. What do you think? And what do you think there's a big philosophical argument in this game that the characters have, and that's where Bo switches sides, because Bo is very much on the they are not human side. We must wipe them out to preserve humanity. Mm-hmm. And he eventually comes around, at least on Faye.
And I think that's where the whole story kind of lost me, because I'm in that same boat as you. I'm like, what is wrong with Faye? Faye's human. Just because she was in a robot.
Mm-hmm. So this brings me to the question. And again, Blade Runner spoke to this. And this game it kind of hints at it, but it doesn't ever answer it, which is, what is the psychological difference? How different are the brains of these hollow children?
I will say that they kind of teased a sequel near the end of this game. I think at this point, now playing this game, I would like to see one for that very reason. Mm-hmm. Because now, however many years later it's been, and you can tell a better story now. I think they could really
better story than this.
No, as far as the gameplay goes, and it can be deeper and longer. And
I mean, I would love a binary domain too. I would love more in the binary domain universe.
I mean, because
there isn't that much. Oh, sorry. Go on.
I'm just going to use references from series that I like, but absolutely love Metal Gear Solid. But Metal Gear Solid 2 delve into deeper aspects of it, because you've already been established with most of the characters and most of the way that game works. So using a sequel for binary domain, you can delve into that backstory more than you're able to in an Origin game like this, or the same with Uncharted or any of those kind of games. So that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that this is not a bad story. I think it's a good story, and I very much enjoyed it more than I thought I was going to. There's a lot of times where it tried to be serious, and I just kind of laughed at it because that's who I am. But I'm with you. I think a sequel for this, especially in today's age, and being able to delve deeper into that, would be far superior than what Detroit Become Human attempted to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, it is such a narrow focus, this particular story, right? It's one mission over the course of one day, presumably, or maybe 2 days. But it's a pretty narrow focus. So there's not that much world building. But whenever they do world building, whenever we do get those little cutaways to the world governments, or we meet the little the street urchins who are harvesting the scrap metal. Right. Whenever they do the little world building moments, it's always really good. So I would love to see more. Absolutely.
Yeah, especially, because they talked about there was 107 hollow children, 108 if you count Faye.
And they talked about how they were going to get hunted down.
Yeah, so it'd be fantastic to see the rest of that story with Faye attempting to save these hollow children, and those HCCs, I guess, trying to cope with finding out what they really are, because obviously none of them know that they were in a cyborg when they were born, and it would be really interesting. And this is one of those games where I'm glad that we don't have that quit button, and we always play through it. I think this stuck the landing far better than Evil Within, but both of them, I think, I improved on the longer we played, and playing it on the PS3 and the controls being the way they were supposed to be made the gameplay much better. So this is a really hard game to rate, and I've been bouncing numbers in my head this entire time. So I'm curious. I do believe this will be the first time that you rate the game higher than me.
Oh, sure. Are we already at ratings? I don't know if we've covered the whole story. Other than, I guess we're...
What else? I feel like we've covered it pretty good, but...
Well, we mentioned the final boss fight against those mechs. What we haven't mentioned is that's the American government comes in to basically claim the AI. So we've got the standoff.
Oh, yeah. The American, by the way, says one of the most typical lines. I want you to come up with a list of games that either say, this is not a game, or what do you think this is, a movie, or my favorite line that he says, I'm not the bad guy here, you're the bad guy. I'm the good guy in this story. I was like, that is such typical bad guy speak.
Oh, it's great. I love I love the Americans in this game. Really like that finale. But so there's this standoff. So let's talk a little bit about the choices. We got off the track there a little bit. I was about to talk about how Kane, one of the decisions when I first played this game, at the point where Armada controls all the robots, you can lose Kane. Mm-hmm. Then later, at the point where the Australian guy, what's his name? Gosh, or is he British?
I think he's British and he's Troy Baker, but I can't think of his character name.
Charles Gregory, Troy Baker, yes. Troy Baker really, really, really wants to kill Faye. And you have that awesome boss fight, which we haven't even talked about, where you fight Faye and the Shinobi Squad, which are these fantastically fast, little robots with spinning blades that will wreck your shit. And you have to just really kind of run around and avoid them as best as you can and poke at them. There's a shotgun you can pick up, which is somewhat helpful, but, will not get you through the fight just by itself. And at the end of that fight, depending on your relation with Faye, you can spare her. There's this moment where he basically makes everyone else believe, he makes Gregory believe that Faye is dead. And then there's the reveal that, oh no, actually, you just pretended to kill Faye and Faye is alive, which you don't get, obviously, if Faye dies. Mm-hmm. And
honestly, I mean, you use the word choices. What I like about this game and talking to you and understanding how this system works now, because when I was playing it, I'm like, what is the point of this relationship system? It's not choices. It's just based on what level they are. So it just plays out. You're talking about all these different things that, for me playing it for the first time, I never realized that this one segment could be completely different if you were an asshole to this person the whole time. So, I mean, the choices are how you respond to them in their conversation pieces throughout the game and not shooting them in the face, I guess.
Yep.
But no, I think it's a very clever way of doing it.
Right. Yes. And so getting to the finale, basically, there is a standoff between Charles Gregory and the Americans who show up over whether or not to destroy the AI. And a vicious fight ensues, and that is if you have a good relationship with Faye, that is when Faye pops back in to save your ass. So, and the other neat thing with this is once it all resolves, basically, you, Gregory, the other team member Rachel, the survivors basically all decide, well, Faye is okay. She's going to be hunted for the rest of her life by this shadowy government, but we're going to give her a head start to get to safety, and you let her go. So she is the one. She presumably, if the other ones get hunted down, like they say they will be kind of the only offspring of this super advanced artificial intelligence that you just took out to go out into the world. And I love this. This is one of my favorite things about the choices in this game. During the boss fight with Faye and the Shinobi Squad, there is this kind of offhanded conversation between Faye and Dan, where you can, she keeps taunting you. She thinks she's decided you're here to kill her, and she's going to do what she's going to do in self-defense, and she's taunting you, and you have the option to yell back at her that you love her. And if you do that, there will be a post-credit sequence where it's like months later, and Faye is in some Middle Eastern country in the desert, being in a fight with a giant robot and a bunch of soldiers, and Dan comes in to save her with a giant minigun and takes them all out, and they reunite and kiss and walk off into the sunset. So that's your end. For me, that's the canon ending. Is you keep the whole squad together, everybody joins in to defend Faye, and then at the end, Faye and Dan go off to live on the run together.
For the sequel that will never come.
I love this game, as you can probably tell.
Yeah, and honestly, I've turned on it. Like, if we would have rated this before, they would have got a really bad score, and now it's going to get pretty good. So I want to know, sir.
So you were about to give your score when I told you that.
I want you to give your score, because I haven't decided yet.
Jeez, really?
I'm between two.
I'm going to... So, all right, let's put it this way. while I love this game, I have to acknowledge that it definitely has flaws. There are ways in which it could be better. The excessive barks, dial them down. I don't like that you can miss dialogue if you don't walk up to the person in time to respond. Because you have to walk up to the person if you're not using the voice control. So I guess if you're using voice control, which never worked for anyone in any version of the game, you wouldn't have to do this. But since we live in a reality where that big gimmick didn't work, it's very frustrating that you can mess up. Like, you can miss out on bonuses just because you didn't walk up to them in time and hit the button to pick a response. So that's annoying. Other than that, these are niggling things. I think the shooting's good. I think the dismemberment's really good. I personally think the story is super ahead of its time. I apologize to anybody that I spoiled Blade Runner 2049 for. But I really... Like, this game basically did that story and those very concepts and commented on those themes arguably better long before. Not that I'm saying that there's an influence there, because binary domain is an obscure thing that most people don't know. And it's hard to even find plot summaries of it. That's the shocking thing. Mm-hmm. Just in the process, because you praised me early on in the show for doing such great notes on Last of Us Part 2. And I felt
where have those gone, Jens? No,
I've become so lazy that now fine. I just try and find whatever the best plot summary is, for reference. But there basically are no good plot summaries I could find of this game anywhere. It's almost like people don't care. And this game is really prescient and ahead of its time, and conceptually, as far as science fiction stories go, super interesting.
I'm starting to wonder if this is going to be Jens' highest rated game of this show. Let's see.
So I would put it in the category of, like, what the Ghost in the Shell movie is, or a Blade Runner, or an Ex Machina, or something. It's, that's kind of the bucket of genre that I put this in. And, for me, I guess I'm going to give it a 9.
It is Jens' highest rated game on the show. That's awesome. And hey, I can't blame you for it. I'm not against it. I will say that as far as my rating goes, if I was continued to play on the PC and had the issues I was having on there with playing on the wrong controller and everything, I was looking at a 6. I was really grumpy 2 weeks ago when we talked about this the first time. Obviously, I have turned on it. The story I thought was interesting. Like you said, a little bit ahead of its time. Mm-hmm. I would like to see them dive into it, which shows that this game is good. I'm far more interested in a Binary Domain 2 than playing The Evil Within 2. So that is my benchmark. Is now going to be higher than that. I had a bit more issue with the camera than you did. As far as it felt a little jerky to me, but I will give that a bit of a pass because it is a PlayStation 3 game, and I'm sure if I went back and played some of those other games, it would have been just as jerky as people were figuring that stuff out. I'm going to go an 8. I think I'm going to go 8. On the IGN scale, that's great. And
yep, that's totally fair.
And I think that is where I'm going to land on it. As you said, there's just a few things that we would like to tweak. But for a game of its time, I think, as you said, I'm very glad that you picked this game because it's a very good hidden gem that I was surprised by the time I got done. So, and actually it was pretty short. Comparative.
Yeah, it's not a huge... I mean, I spent about 9.5 hours on it, which is, I think longer than... I just spent more time on games, I think. I spent way more time on... Oh, sorry, go on.
I think the reason why I give this an 8 is because of the subtlety of the choices. Like you said, all of this stuff can change. And talking to you during this has actually helped me with my score, because when I got done, I went, well, what was the point of all these conversations? Nothing ever came up to it. And then, as you pointed out, everything changed based on all that, but it doesn't throw it in your face. And that's what I like. It's not like a David Cage game where, okay, you made this choice. Now watch how it completely wrecks, and we're going to show you exactly where you screwed up. In this game, it's so subtle And
Here's the thing, though. I think game designers have figured out that most people want that reinforcement. They want that feedback. That's why, all those Telltale games will always tell you, this character will remember that and all that stuff. It's all about constantly reinforcing to you that you're making choices.
But you know why they do that, right? Because people like me are so dumb, we don't realize that that's what's going on.
But I mean, that's what's neat about it to me. But I can also, I could totally see somebody in a game design seminar say, don't do this. Just like, you might say, don't do this about their stupid voice inputs, which tying this to the voice inputs is even crazier.
I'm glad there was other options and what you did not have to do your voices.
Yeah.
That would have been rough.
So that's the reason why it's not a 10, right? That's the one point I'm deducting here.
I never did try that on the PlayStation 3.
It's not good. I did it on the Xbox. I could never get it to work on the 360.
That's the one thing I forgot to try. Maybe I'll try and we can talk about it on the next one. But our next episode, which will actually come out around Christmas, but I'm sure we will film it before then. We are going to start our discussion on Cyberpunk 2077. I am pretty sure this is going to be the first in this series where we do not have chapters to go off of. So, and it's also going to be the first game where who knows where we're going to be at.
Are we just going to have to set first 15 hours?
I don't...
are we just going to set goals for how many hours we're going to do? Is that what we're going to...
Maybe. From what I've heard, this game, main storyline-wise, is only 20, 25 hours long.
Yeah, but I'm going to do sides. We want to talk about the side stuff.
And I'm sure I'm going to do some side stuff, too. It's just going to be how much they're out there. So we'll see if it's... I've played a little bit of The Witcher 3. Again, very good game. It just... I decided to play it, and then something really big came out, and then I went, oh... Never mind. I think I started playing it and then Resident Evil 3 came out. So then I just stopped and forgot to go back. But if it's like that and you get to this one area of the map and there's 97 side quest things, I might just push through. But if they do it really smartly, which I've heard is the case, is they blend things together really well, then yes, we'll have a lot of side quest stuff to talk about. But it'll be really interesting because everything I've heard is that, again, these choices are going to even make side quests available or not available. So it's the first time where I'm just going to tell you, play the game and join us for that next episode. And we will do our best before we start getting into it to let you know how far we are. So we're not farther ahead than you think we are. So it'll be really interesting. But I'm really excited for it. And like you, it is almost ready for me to play once we get done and I get some other stuff done. So any thoughts on Cyberpunk before we go?
I was looking at the Giant Bomb Quick Look just prior to us recording this podcast, and it looked rough. The frame rate was stuttery. There were all sorts of weird bugs happening.
I'm hoping that day one patch fixes some of that. But we will see.
That was the PC version. Nobody's really seen what the console version is like.
That's what really worries me, is they won't even allow you to see it.
Yeah. But I did really like what I saw of the city. Just driving around the city seemed really awesome. And I like a lot of the interior design that I've seen. So similar to Like a Dragon, I think I'll spend a lot of time just looking at the, all the ornate or really, in this case, the, slick, cyberpunky...
Right. It just
furniture and wall decor and all that stuff.
Tell the truth. You're going to spend 4 hours on the character design.
I am probably going to spend a couple of hours on the character creator. I'm probably not going to actually get into the real game tonight.
I'm sure Haley is probably going to be the one that plays it tonight, and I guarantee she doesn't get to any of the gameplay. She'll be all character creator tonight. But that will be in 2 weeks' time, right around Christmas. But if you want to listen to us talking about movies based on video games, we will be back next week to start our Resident Evil series. And we start with the original Resident Evil movie, which, I'll just say spoilers right now, I thought was an okay movie till I rewatched it for the first time in the last couple of years.
I've had my eyes open all along.
and I was wrong. So we will get into that next week. So you can catch Jens at Aperture Silence on Twitter. You can catch me at Randy Isbell. You can check out our podcast and our links, and that's about it on our at chapter_select on Twitter. Obviously, check out all the other podcasts on the W2M network, and check out W2Mnet.com, where Jens has done his first review. Mm-hmm. I have an outline on Bugsnax to get that in, but my last review was on Astro's Playroom, which was fantastic. And check out everything else there. But until next week, have a great time. Enjoy Cyberpunk. And if we don't hear from you before then, have a Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everyone.